Hello and welcome to Day 7 of Carry the Fire. Today we're going to look more deeply at mindset and at those invisible limits that most people never realize are controlling them and that they live under. There's no shortage of quotes to this effect. Whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right, and others like that one. And this sentiment sounds cliche because it's been repeated so often. But cliches usually exist because they point to something that is true. And rather than quote it, I want to show you this today. So we're going to start once again with a study about rats. In the 1950s, a researcher named Kurt Richter wanted to see how long rats could swim before they drowned. So in the first condition, he simply placed rats in water and let them swim and they could no longer continue. Almost all of them drowned right around the 15-minute mark. So that established a baseline. Rats can swim for 15 minutes before they will drown. Then Richter changed one variable. In the second condition, he put rats in the water just like before, but right before that 15-minute mark, he pulled them out, dried them off, he let them rest for a little bit, and then he put them back in the water. How long do you think they swam this time? Maybe 15 minutes, maybe twice as long, 30 minutes, 60 if you're really optimistic? Well, those guesses wouldn't even be close. The rats who were rescued and then put back in the water didn't swim for 60 minutes, which would be 4 times as long. They swam for up to 60 hours. That's 15 minutes compared to 3,600 minutes. The difference wasn't physical capacity, it was belief. When the rats didn't believe they could be rescued, they gave up. But when they had hope, their limits expanded dramatically. It's not the most ethical or compassionate study, but it reveals something profound. We are capable of going so much further if we can break through the limits we set for ourselves. The amazing power of belief is very well documented. When pharmaceutical companies test new drugs, they don't just compare the results of those using the drug to those not using it. They also have to compare their results to a group taking a placebo, people who believe they're receiving the treatment but actually aren't. Why do they need to do this? Why have a placebo group? Because belief alone produces measurable effects. The placebo effect is one of the most robust findings in all of medicine. People taking placebos always do better than those doing nothing. People heal faster, experience less pain, and show real physiological changes simply because they believe something is helping them. We see this everywhere. It shows up in cryotherapy, cupping, that KT tape, ice packs, and even the Band-Aids we give children. Belief amplifies outcomes, sometimes dramatically. In one fascinating study from the 1970s, a group of weightlifters was told they were part of a competition. The 6 lifters, they were told, who made the greatest gains over a 7-week period would receive steroids for the final 4 weeks. Again, this is not the most ethical study. After 7 weeks, the researchers randomly selected 6 men and told them they had made the best gains, so they were now going to receive the steroids. But that was a lie. They were given placebo pills. What happened next stunned the researchers. During the first 7 weeks, these lifters who were randomly selected added an average of 5.8 pounds to their squat. So they increased their squat by 5.8 pounds in over 7 weeks. During the 4 weeks where they believed they were on steroids, they added an average of 41.8 pounds to their squat. That's 5.8 pounds in 7 weeks compared to 41.8 pounds in just 4 weeks, nearly 7 times the progress and half the time. Belief didn't just change how they felt, it changed what their bodies were capable of doing. Belief heals, belief energizes, belief expands limits, and belief can also kill you. In a powerful TED Talk, psychologist Kelly McGonigal describes a long-term study that followed 30,000 Americans over 8 years. At the beginning, participants were asked 2 questions. How much stress have you experienced in the past year? And the second question, do you believe stress is harmful to your health? 8 years later, researchers looked at who had died. At first glance, it appeared that people who experienced high stress were 43% more likely to die. But here is the crucial detail. That increased risk only applied to people who believed stress was harmful. People who experienced high stress but did not believe that stress was dangerous were no more likely to die. In fact, they had the lowest mortality rate of anyone in the study. Take a second to digest this. Stress did not kill people. Believing you were under a lot of stress and believing that the stress you are under is harmful did kill people. That should set off alarm bells, especially since for years we've been telling people that stress kills. But the truth is more nuanced than that. Stress is only deadly if you believe it is. If instead of seeing it as a threat, you believe that stress energizes you, sharpens you, and helps you grow stronger, then remarkably, you may actually live longer than people who experience little stress at all. which is no wonder when you consider that every president since Jimmy Carter has lived into his 90s. The president's a pretty stressful job. Still, there is a risk of oversimplifying this complex phenomenon. Of course, we can't just expect to infinitely increase stress without problems. So balance is a good goal. Chronic unmanaged stress paired with poor recovery is going to be really undesirable. But the deeper point remains. How often do we unintentionally make people more fragile, more anxious, and more limited by feeding them a self-limiting prophecy about themselves and the world? Let me show you what the opposite looks like. Kyle Maynard was born with a rare condition. His arms end at his elbows and his legs at his knees. When Kyle was 2 years old, his father made a difficult decision. The family would stop helping him eat. Kyle learned to use a prosthetic spoon, then a knife and fork. His dad wasn't being cruel. He insisted that the family stop feeding Kyle and doing other things that one might reasonably expect families to do for a 2-year-old who didn't have arms and legs, because he believed in Kyle. He wanted Kyle to live a full, independent life, and he knew that to do that, he'd have to work hard to overcome many limits. That approach came to define Kyle's upbringing. Kyle Maynard went on to climb Mount Kilimanjaro and Mount Aconcagua, become a mixed martial artist, win 2 ESPYs, and build a successful career as an author and speaker. What separates him from others, what led to his success, isn't that he was gifted. It's that he had more reason than most to excuse himself, but he grew up in a family that refused to reinforce those excuses. He faced more adversity than most, which meant he had more opportunity to train his willpower, one of the most important, most trainable traits for success in the modern world. Contrast that with how we often operate today. We tend to accommodate people the moment they say they're anxious, stressed, or overwhelmed. Particularly with young people, we tend to see them struggle and immediately rush in to solve their problems for them, to pave over the bumpy road. And I'm not saying that empathy is wrong. All right, I believe strongly in the importance of being empathetic. I'm saying that if people have done that for you your entire life, you should ask yourself a serious question. How much more might you be capable of? What stories have you told in your own life that may be limiting you? That you are shy, that you are not a good public speaker, that you just aren't a math person maybe? Once you say those things enough, they harden into an identity. They become self-fulfilling prophecies. You limit yourself from any other option. And the reality is, you are not a finished product. You are always changing. You must allow yourself to grow. And you must allow yourself to be surprised by life, to be surprised by what you yourself might be capable of. This is what psychologists call cognitive flexibility, the ability to revise your self-concept as you grow. Your mind is not fixed. It is adaptive and malleable. It is able to be formed and changed. And one of the clearest demonstrations of this comes from cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT. CBT is perhaps the most successful intervention for a wide range of mental health conditions, including depression, anxiety disorders, OCD, PTSD, eating disorders, and substance abuse. Back in college, I used a form of CBT called exposure therapy to overcome my own anxiety disorder. My anxiety was somewhat complex. I wasn't just anxious about things in the world. I was anxious about the effects of anxiety itself, and this spiraled into a number of irrational obsessions. What I learned from the process of overcoming this anxiety was that anxiety and phobias are one of the most well understood psychological conditions that there are, and that the treatment is surprisingly direct. Gradual exposure. You systematically expose yourself to what you fear until the fear loses its power over you. You habituate yourself to it so that it lessens. For example, if you have a fear of riding elevators, you might just start by visualizing yourself riding an elevator. Then look at pictures of the elevator you're afraid of. Then you could go watch people get in and out of an elevator. Then you might ride up one floor. Then you'll spend 30 minutes riding the elevator. This is done over time, progressive, uncomfortable, but extremely effective. Experience leads to habituation, and anxiety decreases. Most anxieties and phobias respond to this kind of action-based progression. But here's the problem. Most people who suffer from these conditions are accommodated for years by the people around them. Everyone around them adjusts. Avoidance becomes easier, and as avoidance grows, fear grows with it. The lesson is not just therapeutic, it's human. It applies to all of us. The core tenets of CBT apply to everyone, not just those with a diagnosis. At its core, CBT is built on a simple truth. Most of the limits that we think we have are not real. They're learned, and they can be unlearned by taking action. For example, one CBT therapist explained shyness and the social fears that seem to afflict all of us at some point or another. She said that people aren't shy because they're incapable. They're shy because they haven't practiced social interaction. Talking to someone, asking someone out, even making a phone call, those are skills. And like any skill, they can be trained. But there's a catch. You have to stay in that uncomfortable space long enough to improve. And no one embodied this better than one of the founders of CBT, a man named Albert Ellis. As a young man, Ellis was painfully shy. He wouldn't talk to women and he avoided them completely. But one day, he'd had enough. He decided to do something about it. He went and sat on a bench near the New York Botanical Garden and made himself talk to every woman who sat down that day. He did this over and over, like exposure therapy. In 1 month, he spoke to 130 women. Some walked away immediately, but most didn't, and he saw firsthand something powerful. Nothing bad happened. No one freaked out, no one called the cops. The thing he'd feared for so long wasn't really that bad. And that's when he realized something important. You don't overcome fear by thinking your way out of it. You do it through action. You do the dang thing. As Ellis later said, the trouble with most therapy is that it helps you feel better, but you don't actually get better. You have to back it up with action, action, action. That's the point. All right, that's the goal today. That's the lesson. Action, action, action. This is exactly what we talked about last week. When you pile up enough days in a row of action, it changes what you believe is possible. It changes your identity. Write every morning, and you don't just write. You become a writer. Train consistently, and you don't just exercise. You become one of those healthy, fit people. CBT works because it confronts false mental limits and then breaks them down with action. That lesson isn't just for therapy patients. It's for anyone who wants to live a bigger and better life. So let me leave you with a warning and a challenge. The warning: your beliefs are not neutral. They shape how you feel, how you look, and how you behave. They shape your perception of reality. They shape your future, and most of them don't come from careful thought. They come from repetition. So the challenge for this lesson will vary depending on your need, depending on you. If there is a fear or challenge or anything that came up this week as I talked, I want you to sit with that and take action. Action this day. Come up with a plan and act. In addition, I want to just start by honestly noticing your limits. Start to pay attention to this. Notice the stories you tell yourself when things get hard. Notice where you assume you have limits without evidence. Notice the quiet narratives that excuse you from effort. Notice how you might judge other people. Next week, we're going to look at how beliefs are installed and how to intentionally train new beliefs. And that's where we're going to pick this up. As always, please jump right into the questions in the conversation because that's where the real magic happens. Thank you for being here today. Carry the fire.